It's doing its thing up, and we're up.
We're live.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
7 p.m. Israel Standard Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. How you doing, Rabbi Dr. Yosef Lin?
Great. Really
Yeah?
great. Nice to see you. Nice to be here.
Better to see you.
We're making it happen.
Yeah, l'chaim.
L'chaim. Nice to see you.
Beautiful to see you, Rabbeinu. Let's jump in.
Let's go for it.
I was thinking through your background, which to a lot of people who know me well would know my experience and the impact that you've had in my life over the last 7 years. I think, yeah. When I landed up in Machon Yaakov by mistake, thanks to our good friend Dennis Ban and his trickery. So there's pieces of your background that I don't think I've heard, and a lot of my friends wouldn't have heard. And then there's a lot of friends of mine who may not know any of your background. So the questions that have been on my mind is, at what point in your life were you clear that you wanted to be a doctor in positive psychology? Or was it a roller coaster journey?
I don't think it was a roller coaster journey. I think it was like a pretty straight and clear journey.
Nice.
I think for me is, like I told you a long time ago, when I was in college for my undergraduate degree, I was focusing on architecture. And through a variety of different changes in my life, I basically came to the conclusion that designing your, new kitchen wasn't necessarily what I wanted to focus on. But I love the world of building and structure and doing things in a healthy way. And I shifted from that world to the world of people. And that's basically led the past 20 years of my life down the road of working with individuals like yourself.
Thank you.
And for me, basically, the world of positive psychology just became a part of the natural progression of the unbelievable tools out there that I really feel and I've seen can really give people the life that they want. So as I pursued this world of trying to give people healthy lives and allow them to achieve their goals, positive psychology fit right in there in a very easy and kind of obvious next step.
Wow. Makes a lot of sense.
Make sense? Okay.
For sure. Without going too deep on this idea, one of the ideas that come to mind when I'm thinking or sharing with other people how grateful I've been to have a relationship with you and the impact you've made on my life, and my wife and children are very grateful, thank you, would be the fact that you are, from what I understand, the only rabbi in the world who studied positive psychology under the father of positive psychology himself, Martin Seligman. So, and I'm always mindful and thinking of the connections between Torah principles and a lot of what I've learned to be positive psychology principles, and a lot of it from you. So, at what point did it click for you that the connection between becoming a rabbi? Well, I guess the first question would be, at what point in this journey did you become a rabbi?
So the rabbi part started, that rabbi part started, I want to get to where you're really going, which I think is really important. The rabbi part started is when I made that switch of not wanting to basically focus on the world of, physical infrastructure. At that point in my life, I didn't grow up looking like this. Judaism started to become something which was a real value of mine, and I started to build my life around it. So the obvious next step was staying in this lane. And so becoming a rabbi was kind of a natural shift because it kind of happened that at the same time, number one, I was looking into Judaism, and number two, I was realizing that architecture wasn't necessarily for me. So the rabbinic path wasn't such a drastic move.
Right.
But I want to get to where you're really headed, because I think that's relevant, especially to our work together.
Yeah.
And the real thing is that, this world of positive psychology, I think, is very important, is that I had never heard of it. It's been around for many years. I had never really heard of it. My whole connection to it came via Judaism. And what I was doing is immersing myself in basically learning the deeper ideas, and more importantly, using the practical skills in a lot of my work that I was dealing with especially students at Machon Yaakov. And it was only until my wife went to London to go visit her family, and I'd been speaking about these things and teaching them and writing, and then one day she was traveling and she went to a bookstore and she saw some book about working on your natural strengths, and all of a sudden she came home and she gave it to me. Now, being a reader was not my strength in life.
Yeah.
I can look back and say one book that I probably read a few times, it was that book.
What was that book?
The book is called Now Discover Your Strengths.
Ah, nice. The Gallup one?
Yeah. And that book just showed me oh my gosh, there's a whole world of psychology that's basically running parallel to everything that I'm, fired up about in the world of Judaism. So that was kind of how the whole thing happened.
Wow. That gives me chills, because as you're speaking this, I was thinking through what my connection to positive psychology was and my connection to Torah principles. And something that I'm forever grateful to you for was that you connected the two for me over that year and a half in Machon Yaakov, which was foundational. To think that these ideas that I'd been scratching the surface of via books and anything I could find were really 3,000-year-old Jewish principles was earth-shattering for me. I think that's.
I mean, listen, I didn't invent that. I was shown by my teachers and mentors and Rebbeim and everything. They open up that these worlds don't have to be two separate entities, and there's amazing ways of how to combine them and gain the best of both. But I found that positive psychology in particular, especially when you look at how Judaism describes what a human being should look like and how they should be built, this was an area of psychology that I felt lined up in the most awesome manner.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank God for that. Not sure where I'd be now if you didn't figure that out.
Well, someone taught me, so I just passed it on to you.
Thank you. So then, jumping forward now to, you are now a fantastic, world-renowned executive coach, keynote speaker, published author by 3 books.
2 books, yeah.
2 books, amazing books. I highly recommend everyone goes to get them if you haven't yet. Little plug for you. So when did you as a executive coach come into the world? How long ago?
That was probably around the time of a bit before the pandemic hit.
Great.
And there were a lot of things I always had a desire to do, whether it was with individuals or certain projects. And kind of the whole field of executive coaching just had, just an opportunity to kind of allow me to share a lot of things I felt very passionate about. So again, it was kind of a natural fit for me to kind of lead in that direction. And that's something I'm still very immersed in today.
Yeah. Thank God I've had some
You've been in it for how long?
I've been in it as a coach with a coach hat on for 2 years to officially wear that hat. The activities of it I've been a fan of for probably 10, 15 years and try to help where I can, but with the mentor hat on.
Mm-hmm.
And what one of my mentors, Rabbi Barry Klein, helped me understand was that until I stepped it up from a mentor who generally doesn't have responsibility, no achrayus, if I could step that up to a coach, that's where my next level of growth would come. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was
How long has that been for?
That's 2 years.
2 years. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. So now I'm intrigued. This is one of my favorite questions to ask people. And I'm intrigued, which parts of the work you do today light you up the most? Let me clarify.
It's a tricky question. I think for me, one of the parts, and I would say probably the part, is when I see people that are alive in their professional life. I just see in our world today that our professional life like dominates our reality. We no longer live in a world of work-life balance. It's a different beast.
Yeah.
And what we do in our professional endeavors spills over to our well-being and to all the things that really matter so much, whether that's your social life, family life, spiritual life, whatever it may be. And when I can help people really make sure that they're coming alive in that part of their life, I just really see it as not just an amazing thing for that by itself, but the spillover to so many other areas will be truly awesome. So I think for me in particular, especially in my executive coaching practice, where I really try to focus on that area, because I just see the benefit that comes when people feel alive in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. It just, every other place just benefits in an awesome way. So I'm not here to negate other areas of where people have to work or where other, people offer services, but that's kind of what's been like a huge drive for me.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. So you've obviously had a lot of experience over your careers. What now? 15, 20 years in this?
20 years.
20 years in this sector?
20 years.
Wow. Wow. So if we connect this back to a Torah concept and how this relates to a lot of what goes on in coaching practices, the idea of Cheshbon HaNefesh, or Cheshbon Nefesh to some, what does that mean to you when you hear that word? Because I know I've heard from some people, it's not always so positive. It can be heavy. Where does it go to for you?
I think that it goes two places. Number one, it's so obvious how important it is.
Right.
But number two, it's a stressor.
Yeah.
And, over the past 20 years, I don't think I've ever met someone who I've worked with closely who will tell me that it's not important. Everyone holds it to be important.
Right.
But where I've seen people struggle a lot is how to do it. What's the system? How do you create accountability? How do you keep it going? And I think that there's a lot of, stress, because on one hand, we all know that we have a certain dream of what we want to become, and we got to get there in a structured and systematic way. On the other hand, actually doing that and keeping track of it is a very hard thing. So I find for a lot of people, we're going to start speaking here about Rosh Hashanah and these things. I find for a lot of people, it's a very stressful reality, because this idea of now thinking about my life, what goals have I accomplished? What haven't I done? What's going to be next year? Why does this year look the same as last year? All of a sudden, it can be very overwhelming and create way more stress than growth.
Wow. So it could be a net negative.
I've seen it again. I see it as something which is, I would say, not even just a negative. I see it as something that can create a lot of stress for people more than anything else. Yeah. Let me ask you, what would your answer to that be?
Yeah, personally, in my personal relationship with it, it's been a pressure to get right in Elul. And that's where the pressure begins. Because then Rosh Hashanah comes along, and there's a very serious time of the year to take certain parts of that planning seriously and give it a lot of attention. And then life takes over. And then we're into December, and then it's time to plan businesses, which in my reality takes over very quickly. And it becomes a source of guilt that I'm not holding myself accountable or disciplined enough to see out some of the goals that I set. And then I guess a big relief is that next year Elul rolls again. I get to start again.
I hear that. I mean, you just added in. I think a more of a difficult problem is that you have a whole other world. Like again, when you're on, let's say, a person's on LinkedIn, you'll start seeing by like mid-November, everyone's talking about like did you hit your goals for this year?
Yeah.
Let's give it one final push.
Yeah.
And then like all of a sudden mid-December, it's about okay, what are your goals for next year? So like all of a sudden you have like from like mid-November to mid-January, which is all talking about goals. So now you have a huge other thing, which is like the goals in your professional life as well. So like, where do you, how do you balance these things? Is that done in Elul? Is that done in December? Like, so it's, you're adding on like, 2 times a year with like a serious accounting, and that could be hard. And we've all seen as well in people's professional lives, like the importance of tracking how you did, where you're going, like that's also a huge and crucial thing.
Yeah, for sure. So my mind's going now. So in your one-on-one executive coaching, when you're coaching guys over a period of time that goes, say, throughout the year, do you see that guys who are on top of this activity come to Elul with a different energy?
Listen, I think that I'm going to make a very general statement. Anyone who is using systems or people to, number one, track data, and number two, have accountability, I think any of those people, whenever it comes to whether it's Elul or December, feel different.
So those are people who have an existing framework?
People who are engaged in this process over the year, meaning it's not just, again, I think one of the hardest parts is that whether it's Elul or December, is that if this is just like, let's take Elul. So if Elul is the only time where now I like really go into my goals and really think about it and really, analyze different parts of my life, like, whoa, that's like stressful. If someone's doing that over the course of the year,
right.
So like different ballgame. And I think those are kind of like the two camps of people that I've seen. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, well, it's making me think about the idea of preparation. So if I'm waking up in Elul is the time to get this all right for Rosh Hashanah and the New Year, it's this idea of when's the best time to plant a tree. You've heard this one?
No,
10 years ago. 10 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? Today. So like, when's the best time to do my planning for the year ahead? Ideally at the beginning of last Elul. Because now I'd be coming through with data. I would have had goals to reflect on already. I would have had progress that I could reflect on, learnings that I could learn from and adapt. Second best time is to start this Elul. So the game changer is to be on the framework or on the process consistently, and not to have this almost like haphazard energy of, oh, it's Elul, let's plan Maruchnias.
Right.
Oh, it's December, let's plan business and career.
Right.
And because exercise and eating are so foundational to a human being, they go into both and create more stress.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that even more than that, I think that what people struggle with, I think either again, whether it's Elul or December, is I think people struggle with, okay, very good, I'm going to come up with some, let's say, goals, but like, how am I going to actually make these things happen?
Right.
And unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is people want to try and they want to succeed. So they'll engage in work in Elul, they'll engage in work in December, right? But what will end up happening is that like that will be like a nice exercise, which won't go very far, and it'll kind of just fall away because like I have no plan of actually how to make this happen.
So that would be a framework.
I think that is I think the most important thing when it comes to any of the world of goal setting is okay, like how am I going to actually make this happen? If a person doesn't have a plan of how to make that happen, and part of a process of making it happen is making sure that you're on track, that you have accountability, all these things that we know to be true.
So just before jumping into the framework, when you speak about Cheshbon HaNefesh, and we're speaking about the annual planning, Elul, December, it takes me all the way through to the micro segment of that, which I heard Rabbi Gershenfeld mention, that the minimum daily should be 5 minutes a day to reflect on the day and think through the day ahead as a minimum. So that's a lot of touch points in between. That's set the annual right all the way down to tomorrow. So in between is weeks, months, quarters, etc. In your experience, what have been the most crucial next touch points in there? Is it daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly?
I think like this. I'll tell you what I recommend. It may not be the ideal, but I think it's actually sustainable.
Right.
Is what if it could be a system of once a month? I've been teaching a topic, a seminar about compartmentalization.
Yeah, thank you.
For the past 10 years, we did it together.
Yeah.
Okay. And one of the things I speak there is that let's say Rosh Chodesh happens every month, the new moon every month.
Right.
That's an amazing time once a month where someone can like, okay, let's look at my goals, am I headed in the right direction, etc. So I'm all for, again, a person's doing something on a daily basis, and like I'm always trying to figure out some options that are really sustainable. People's lives are busy. Like people are really busy out there trying to juggle an enormous amount. And take the things on your plate, that like you have to juggle, and then take all the things that just like recently came up. Like even like in my own life, like the past couple of days, like there's things that just came up that are like very time consuming. Family needs, personal needs, like you name it. And so like I think people are balancing and juggling so much. On the other hand, so many people want to do good and they want to grow and they want to have their life go a certain direction. So I've found is like if I can get people to a place where like once a month they are like checking in with themselves, jackpot.
So for you, if anybody's going to get anything right, it should be the annual planning and the monthly Cheshbon HaNefesh.
And really, really they go together. The annual planning is like the real meat and potatoes, and the monthly is checking in with that. Again, how to divide, personal, professional, that's a whole separate conversation, but that's kind of how I see it. But I'm always trying to figure out how to create sustainable systems that actually can work.
Right.
And, so I just find that more and more as I see, as I get older, as I see more students, as I'm involved with more clients who are, CEOs or trying to build a new business, I just see people have so much going on. And therefore, like what my mind's always going towards, like, what can we do that can actually, stick with us long term?
You reminded me of a quote that I might misquote from you. But when you speak about how busy our lives are, I remember I had a handful of coaches. I hadn't put it together. I woke up one morning and realized, whoa, I've got 4 or 5 coaches across these different things in my life. And I said to you, what's with it, that where we at? And I had friends who have multiple coaches in different things. And you said to me, correct me if I got this right or wrong, our lives are so busy that we have to pay other people to help us do the things we want to do that we otherwise wouldn't do.
I mean, I think that, I've definitely spoken about that a lot, and forget me speaking about it, I've seen it to be true in my life.
Right.
I can't tell you the amount of people that I've brought into my life, similar to you, to help me do things that I know how to do it. I can tell you all the steps, but practically speaking, until someone's like in my corner, like pushing me to make it happen, get out of my comfort zone, find the time for it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen nonstop. And I think that, and I think here's the important thing. I don't think it's a weakness.
Right.
I don't think it's a weakness. Like, really, I was like, I think it's people just accepting the reality and saying, whoa, this is really important to me. I want to make it happen. Let me make sure it actually happens.
Yeah. It reminds me of another great line I got from Achan Yaakov, but from Rabbi Orlowek, which was that the goal of life is for a man to figure out what's important, what's more important. And doing that on our own when our lives are so busy can get super confusing, lack of energy to get all the important things done. I've seen a lot go on there.
And I would even add to that saying, and I think what's important is, okay, the things that are really important, how am I going to make sure those actually happen?
Right.
Because a lot of times what happens in our life is that we know things to be really important and we speak about it a lot, but unfortunately the time, effort, and energy we give to them is not so much. So it's not just knowing what's more important and less important, it's making sure those important things actually happen.
Yeah, for sure. Because we're in the business of helping people get that clear.
Yeah, but
we need help ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So what's, coming up to Elul soon with the 3 weeks starting tonight. What's the biggest challenge you see people deal with when it comes to Elul planning? You mentioned the pressure of it, which a lot of us bring into it.
Yeah. I think there are 2 major challenges. Number 1 is people start like late.
Yeah.
Number 2 is people aren't clear exactly like, what does that mean? Like,
you mean when you say people start the Elul Cheshbon Nefesh process late, that's like 2 days before Rosh Hashanah?
Yeah, there they are, and I'm guilty of it as well. I can't tell you how many people, like, there they are, like Rosh Hashanah morning, like sitting down and like, but I think the biggest thing is that people trying to figure out, okay, like, what do I do here? Like, what's the system, how I go about it? Like, very nice. Set goals, think about your life. What do you like? What's a system that like I should do to like actually like think about this and actually execute it? And I see, if you look during the time of Elul, I think that's the most appealing thing to people when they see that. And again, you're in this, it's this environment, during this time during the Chagim, of where it's like, nonstop, like who you're going to be, what's important to you in life,
That's all.
You're surrounded by 24/7 having to think deeply about, who you really are and where you want to go. So I think that, okay, like that's what I find the most. Let's say I've seen, in Mechon Yaakov over 20 years of people trying to figure out systems and how to go about it, and books that can be helpful. Like a lot of the practical ways of it. Okay, like great, you got my buy-in that this is important. Okay, now what?
Yeah. What's the practice? What's the paint by numbers?
Correct.
Right. You got me thinking on that Rosh Hashanah morning, ideally finishing off what was my planning, but finishing off maybe too kind. Okay, well, please God, this year will be different.
Okay, amen.
Amen. So, okay, great. So that's, you've moved now into the idea of the system and the framework.
Yeah.
So what do you think, in your experience, are the key elements that make a framework successful and really impactful for people?
I mean, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
And we can go many different ways with it. I think that there's two real elements. Number one, are you setting the right goals? And number two, do you have a plan to actually make these things happen? And those are kind of the two things I find that are like crucial. Again, we can go into like goal setting theory or different things that Chazal speak about, but like those are the two things I find the most. And that's where people get stuck. And I understand it. I really understand it. And unfortunately, one of the things that can create a lot of stress and anxiety over the course of the year is when there you are, in the middle of your year, looking at your, what you did during Elul, and like you're not on track, you're not even so in touch with it. Things are taking a different direction, but that's what I find is that it's a complicated beast. But those two things I would say is what I see the most. That kind of is like those are the crucial things to really think about.
And where did your mind go to in terms of accountability? Which, for a lot of us who would love to hire you as our executive coach, and working with a lot of great coaches in the world, just affordability becomes a big question. So what, in your experience, we hear this word, the one side of the coin, discipline, and the other side of the coin, accountability. Where does your mind go when people want to rely on their own discipline to achieve these goals?
I don't think it makes me nervous.
Right.
Makes me nervous because I think accountability is not just about making things happen. It's about processing what's going on. It's a fascinating thing. When I was, before Judaism was a part of my life, I was living in basically a world of a lot of professional athletes. These are some of the most disciplined human beings that I met. I was surrounded by, this guy won the Ironman World Championship. Like, people were like serious people.
Wow.
Now, all these people had like numerous coaches, and they were super disciplined. But I think that there's a whole world of accountability of not only making sure things are on track, but discussing where tweaks need to be made, redirecting if things need to happen. There are many ways of how to make it happen. I've seen guys from, my work at Mechon Yaakov. I've seen some guys stick together, and, they will be in a situation where they'll work together as a group of friends, holding each other accountable and checking in with each other. And like, it's an unbelievable thing. I think there are a lot of resources out there, but I get nervous when people just put on themselves the role of discipline. I think like our life requires so much discipline as is.
Right.
And we are using that muscle so much. And now you add a lot of the craziness that comes in with life. Like, I think if people thought more about accountability and less about discipline, they would achieve way more of their goals.
What do you think about expecting your wife to hold you accountable?
I think, listen, I think in any great marriage, our spouse will always be a reminder to us that we have to work on ourselves.
Yeah.
But, I don't necessarily recommend that to be the healthiest model out there. Do I think that we can be for our spouses, a mirror as far as, what needs to be worked on? Yes. I think people should spend more time being, the greatest cheerleader for our spouses. Okay. People don't spend enough time on that. But I think I think putting that pressure on a relationship is not necessarily the healthiest way to go. I think us figuring out ways of how we're going to, have some sort of accountability system, I think is a real game changer and can do awesome things for people. I've seen people do it in many different creative ways. And I think when people go through the Elul experience, and now they have a system set up of how they can make sure that it's not just on them to be disciplined, but they have people in a group and a community that can make sure that these things are actually happening. It's a different ballgame.
100%. Okay, so back to the framework. You got me thinking now. You're obviously had an experience with the harvest pillars, and a lot of it was inspired through your teachings and other teachings at Machon Yaakov and some other coaching frameworks that us and the team have worked with globally. And one of the big ideas we're seeing in the coaching world, there was a lot of amazing techniques and tools how to set goals and a lot of literature on goal setting and the process. But there wasn't that much on the actual, what's called the pillars, or the specific categories that we should be working with. And we were searching for this, but in the Torah world, it was pretty specific. So in the business world had its structures, but when it came to the personal side, the life side, we weren't seeing it in systems out there to say, these are the categories, just follow the steps and get it right. So
what are those categories that, just to make sure for the audience, what are those categories that you've chosen?
So we work with, firstly, they're based on, you guessed it, relationships. So all the life ones are a relationship with ourselves first. As you taught us, we need healthy human beings to start with before we're serving others. Then relationship with others, and then relationship with the Creator Himself, Hashem. So in the relationship with ourselves, we start with vitality, which is all things physical and mental health. So your nutrition, your exercise, etc., is all going in there. Then we have what we term selfish care. What we learned from you was self-care, which in my experience is the hardest pillar for people to put focus on an ongoing basis.
You and I are still speaking about that.
Yeah, because it's so tough. And it's funny, but I think it's more sad than funny how tough it really is. And just as a measure on how busy our lives are, that we value this thing, but we find it so tough to get it right and optimize it. So that's selfish care. And then self-development, because what we built is for aspirational human beings. So we want to be setting goals and tracking and smashing our self-development. And also what we've seen very helpful in goal setting is just framing existing work we're doing. A lot of people we chat to are doing self-development work. It's not being framed anywhere. So it's like we've got these 10 goals we're working on in our lives, and then there's all this other work going on that's not framed. Can't do a holistic plan properly because we don't see all the work. And then we can't really own the achievements because we didn't even set a goal around our self-development. So that was one of the biggest game changers for me, was getting it all on one page.
Amazing.
Then in the relationships with others is, you guessed it, relationship with the Rebbetzin first, wifey to some, kids, and then community. However, we're serving our local community, the etc. But everybody's got ideas around how they want to serve others. but we also don't frame that in a goal and try to smash it over a period. And then we obviously have this section for what are we doing to develop our relationship with Hashem and our relationship with Torah, mitzvahs, etc. So in our experience, that frames a lot of the work that we're all putting into our lives and our growth. It's obviously a little bit of nuances that we, have to figure out where they go. And then in our experience, because we come from more business training, you spend your 20 years training and perfecting how to develop human beings and help people. To us and our team, we spent a lot of those years developing business, and developing people was a byproduct of that. So, or an input to that, should I say, rather, as opposed to the core focus. So what we learned from the business world is that the biggest game changer in the business world is quarterly goals. Taking the Elul planning we've done and now saying, okay, let's get this clear for the next quarter, the next 90 days. What are we going to do to really move the needle and get closer towards this annual goal? And the beauty of that is that 90-day goals, I like to think about them, that they're far enough away to do meaningful things, but they're close enough that I can't really start this next Monday. There's only 12 Mondays to go.
Right.
So it really it accelerates action. It's a real motivator. And that's on the life side.
Mm-hmm.
The work side, I think we'll get into on another time, because we're speaking about the Elul process, which very focused on the life side of the pillars. So in your experience, you've noticed that selfish care pillar is the toughest for people to optimize?
I just want to also mention one thing before I go in there, is that I think that what you've also done as well is, I think, separating the two of them, I think, is a different ballgame. If all of a sudden we can look at, the world of Elul as, more of everyday life, and we can kind of then put, the world of our professional lives, much more, in the December, January world. Right. So all of a sudden that also creates, a situation where you feel way more organized, and it lowers stress a lot. You don't have to do it all at once. And so I think that's an unbelievable thing. I think that's the beauty of the gift of Elul, is that you have this world of where it's just really focusing on who you are as a human being. And then you can now tap into the whole LinkedIn, December, January world of just focusing on just your professional life. And I think you separating these two realities is a very powerful way of how to move forwards.
Yeah, especially because, I mentioned the 7 life pillars, and then there's 3 professional pillars, which have a whole bunch of elements. But getting the planning right for either is, if you're doing it the full plan and you're going all the way to ideal state, all the way down to quarterly goals, that's some serious work that goes in there. And having the freedom to do it over a few months and get it really set up for the year ahead, it takes me to what you were speaking about, where you're passionate about actually finding the frameworks that can actually stick. Right. Not just be theoretical stuff that none of us actually complete.
Right.
Which in my experience in coaching that's the game changer.
Right. That's the
little
game changer.
Pieces that actually stick.
You got it. 100%.
But now I'm going to take you into those pillars and in your experience. So in my experience, everybody will say that the relationship with their Rebbetzim, they really want to work on, and it comes first and they want to smash it. When it comes time to actually sitting in weekly calls and saying, what are we doing next week to really move the needle here? It's a very tough one for people to go deep on, because we all are doing a lot already. So to get the question from your coach who says, what are we doing more next week? I notice can be put people into a bit of a squirm. And then the one that we all, well, I won't say we all, because from what I hear with you and what you get up to, you're pretty on top of the selfish care pillar. But for the rest of us, what I find, it's a very tough one to nail and really get on top of. So my question to you is, do you see the same thing? Number one.
Yeah.
Let's just go deep on those two. This idea with people's wives, that they really want to move the needle. When it comes time to setting tangible outcomes for next week or the next quarter, it's a tough one. And then the selfish care.
So I'll answer both those things. Okay. Number one is I think that when it comes to the world of marriage, where people usually think the investment is, this year we're going to tackle issues X, Y, and Z. And their mind goes to a disease model of like, okay, these are the problems. Let's figure out a way of how to attack them. And maybe they'll attack them, maybe they won't, but that's where their mind goes.
Right.
The biggest unfortunate kind of piece of the puzzle is that, well, there's another whole part that's needed, like, which is what are you doing to proactively invest in this relationship? And anything in our life that's important to us that we want to see it grow and flourish needs like proactive investment. So I think in the world of marriage, it's not just about looking at, okay, we're going to attack these issues. I think it's about, okay, what are we going to do to actually allow us to become closer and engage with each other more? And that's not just getting rid of issues, it's doing proactive things to make that happen. And again, I think that because life is so busy, because we're anyways so intertwined with our spouses, we feel like, okay, the marriage is getting what it needs, and if issues come up, we'll deal with it. But like the idea of like adding on something beyond that. But the unfortunate thing is that we all know very clearly is that when people feel strong in their marriage, everything in life looks different. And if things are going amazing in life and your marriage isn't strong, everything seems a bit gray.
Yeah.
But if your marriage is great and things aren't going that well, you'll see you're able to not only, number one, keep it in perspective, but number two, you're more resilient to be able to handle all the bumps in the road with those different areas of your life. Number two is the world of self-care is, I have seen very clearly in my own life, as I get older, as I try and take on more things, as anything, I just find that the more I invest in my own well-being, everything gets better. And if I don't do it, everything gets worse. Now, it is hard to do. It feels selfish.
Right.
The time is impossible.
Yeah.
I can give all the reasons that I battle.
Yeah.
But if I've seen like the greatest thing that I can do for any part of my life is the more I can just make sure that I'm a healthy human being taking care of myself, everything is just totally different in a positive manner.
Yeah. Very impactful and very relevant for me to think about personally on those two. And, as we speak about these various pillars, what have you seen is the most helpful when people are mid-period? So you're mid-quarter or mid-year. What have you seen are the ideas or tools that people can really take with them to smash those goals and not have that idea you spoke about where you get to the next Elul or you get mid-year and suddenly this is just a source of guilt because you're so far away from the start and you're so far away from the goal?
So I think it's one thing and one thing only. For a person to sit down and really engage with those things. Let's say I take goals from Elul, and now I sit down middle of the year and I really spend time looking at this.
Right.
Going over it, speaking to mentors, making tweaks, figuring out what I should do differently. And I really engage in it in a strong manner.
Right.
That's golden. A lot of times we're so in the mindset of let's not even look at it because we're just far off from it, or it's too anxiety provoking. And therefore but I find the people that I know that are the most successful as far as achieving their goals, whether it's their personal goals or their professional goals, is how much are you spending time actually looking at those goals and therefore doing everything necessary to, again, tweak, make adjustments, figure out a new plan, you name it.
Super helpful. I hope all of that is super helpful for everybody who has been listening to us. This was eye-opening for me. I'm super, super, super excited for part 2, where we're going to get a little bit more into the kishkas
Beautiful.
of the work we're doing together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff. Exciting stuff.
Rabbeinu, I wish you a impactful and meaningful fast.
Thank you.
And
you
next 3 weeks.
And we should hear good news.
Amen, amen, amen.
Okay. Thank you so much for
facilitating
this and for all of your work, and looking forward to making things happen here. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't have words to thank you enough, but I'll keep trying.
Okay.
Toda rabba. Take care, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye-bye.